Kamala Harris sat down with Bret Baier on Fox News last night for an interview, which aired at 6 o'clock. The whole thing was about 26 minutes. We have a couple of clips that we're going to show you here. It was a pretty contentious interview. Here is the first piece where Bret Baier asks Kamala Harris to clarify what she meant by saying, essentially, that she'd do nothing different from Joe Biden if she were given the same 4 years.
You were asked on two different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said. All
right, now I cut there because those two videos that he shows are from the most petty of copyright bullies on YouTube, The View and the Stephen Colbert Show. But basically, you've probably seen those. On The View, she can't name anything she would do different from Joe Biden. On the Stephen Colbert Show, she gives no policy differences between her and Joe Biden, but emphasizes that she's not Joe Biden, which she re-emphasizes here. So that catches you up. That brings you up to speed without getting a copyright trouble.
You're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And
wow. I mean, okay, so we're not going to stop it every 10 seconds, but that is about as damning a rebuke of Joe Biden as you will hear. The fact that your vice president is just saying very plainly, this is not a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency, that just shows you what a weak position they've been in all along. That you're the incumbent vice president and you cannot define your future term as a continuation of the first term. Right. That explains why they're here in the first place. What did I tell you, folks? I said politics is a lot like football, especially as the clock winds down. If it's October and you're winning, what do? You do what Trump's doing. You hold the ball. Right. You stop talking about cats and dogs being eaten. You stop talking about Kamala being Indian and not black. You hold the ball and let the time run down. Well, if you're losing, what do? You throw Hail Mary passes. Appearing on Fox News for an interview, that's a Hail Mary. That's something the campaign would not do unless they felt they had to.
Right, because they know that they're being killed with men. Right. They're trying to go to places that a lot of men watch. That's why, as we'll see in the next segment, they're talking to Rogan even to try to appeal to those. Now, given who their candidate is, Kamala Harris, yeah, I guess they have no choice if the internal polls are as bad as rumored, but that's not going to help. That's like saying, well, you know, the best way to get more men for Hillary, put Hillary on Rogan.
Right. You're right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. All right, here we go.
Like every new president that comes in to office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership.
Fresh and new ideas.
For example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make.
Okay, those aren't new ideas. Those are old ideas.
Yeah, that's that's a neoliberal restoration. And these are the Republicans that Republicans hate. The actual Republican voters, the media class Republicans, love them. They're the same people. They just revolving door in and out of government, in and out of media, in and out of corporate boards.
Well, that's why I say just they're like old Democrats. Ideas. They're too old for the Republican Party. The Republican Party has moved on from those ideas, trotting out these Bush-era neocons, including Liz Cheney, and you can't trot out her father. He's probably not in physical shape to go out and stump for you, but he gave you his endorsement. The Republican neocon Dick Cheney ideas, those are really, really old ideas. Those are not new ideas. Those are old ideas. The business sector, oh, that's a new idea. Politicians listening to the business sector. Wow. What new ideas?
About, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing. Addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about those plans in recent days. Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. So what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we have been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other. Rhetoric and an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up. The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is
tell
about
pollsters,
turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Bret.
More than 70% of people tell the country.
Okay, so he gets to ask this question. Now, look, Bret Baier, throughout this interview, he cuts her off a lot. Now, look, I understand when you're dealing with a person who is notorious for tossing up word salad after word salad after word salad,
and filibuster,
and who has no other tactic but to filibuster because she clearly doesn't know anything that she's talking about. I do understand the impulse to try and cut her off. I do think, to be fair, he overdid it, especially towards the beginning. Yeah. He actually got a little better as it went over. But during the immigration stuff, and this is because she's so vulnerable on the issue, during the immigration stuff, it was ridiculous. Like, she couldn't get a sentence out without him cutting her off. And then it eased up a little bit. But as you can see here, still, like, you got to let her at least answer. I know it's hard because she's there to filibuster and run out the clock. But there's a balance you got to strike. And if I'm being straight and down the middle with you, I don't think he struck it very well. I think he went overboard.
I think he did too. I think it wound up coming off as unprofessional. And yeah, obviously we don't have the level of experience that Bret Baier has. We're still pretty green at this whole interview stuff. But we've done enough of it that, yeah, I get it. You have somebody like this, and it's kind of a hostile witness, right? She's here on Fox. She's done a bunch of softball interviews. You're the first person who might really challenge her. She sat down with. I get the impression they had a very strict time limit that he was working with, where you have to try to get this stuff in. At the same time, yeah, man, you're functioning as a journalist. You're not doing a Vega. You didn't run up at a Kamala event to start screaming at her. You're asking her questions. You have to let her answer the damn question.
Right.
And he did take it to the point that he wouldn't let her answer. That having been said, it is understandable because you do know that you have somebody here who, if you let them, will just run out the clock. When I was a little girl.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you let her, that's what it's going to be. So it was a delicate thing, but he did cross that line quite a bit, I thought.
All right. So now here he goes asking her about the right track, wrong track question.
The country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why?
And I'm sorry, I thought we were still on this segment. One more point I want to point out about her answer, actually. This whole public-private partnership, yeah, that is neoliberalism. That is the neoliberalism that has failed us. This whole concept, get government out of the way, which is a very Republican Reaganite belief that wound up with the Clinton ascension to the presidency and the Clinton, what you might call the Clinton age in the Democratic Party, became the central ethos of the Democratic Party. Just a Republican idea that government should not be the ones behind these programs. It should be micro loans to African women with jewelry shops in the Senegal, funded by Google.
Right. All right. So here he is asking her, right track, wrong track.
Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office
But you've been the person holding the
That is
office.
quite the answer. I have to back this up so we get the full question. So just that makes sense. That is quite the spin there.
On the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade, people have become. But listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president. One, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and it being about him
Madam
instead
Vice
of
President,
the American people. People are tired of that.
Okay, now that part, that is what their message just has to be down the stretch. They have nowhere else to go but there. That pivot from 79% say the country's on the wrong track, so how do you explain that as the incumbent vice president? She has to turn that question, and I thought she did so fairly skillfully there, despite the original awkwardness of being like, well, he's been running for president. What their message has to be down the stretch is that people are exhausted by Donald Trump's antics. It's a very normie pitch to those moderate, fairly affluent, suburban, low information voters who follow politics at the margins and who are just tired of the Trump show. Like, that is what they're going to close on. It's the only thing they can close on. As demonstrated throughout this interview and throughout the whole campaign, they have no record to run on. The only thing they could do is try to peel off as many of those suburbanites who are offended and exhausted. She even uses the word exhausted. I think that's a key word, by Trump's bad manners, and hope that they can keep the polls close enough to the point where if they can peel off just enough of those voters in just enough places, they'll win. It's possible they will succeed in that. It's looking less likely, as evidenced by the fact that she's on this show in the first place. This is a 50-yard pass over the middle of the field. You don't throw that pass unless you feel you have to. A campaign confident that it is in a position to win, she would have never sat down with Bret Baier in the first place. Not in a million years.
Of course not. At first, when they thought they had it in the bag, she wouldn't sit down with anybody.
Right, exactly.
They wouldn't do interviews with anyone if they had their way. It's definitely a sign of desperation. But also, if you look at the whole formulation, the idea that it is Donald Trump who is uniquely prone to finger pointing or making Americans hate each other, the whole liberal class ethos is about the deplorables, the dummies, the bigots, the racists, the homophobes, the sexists that we have to save the country from. And the best thing they might say about them is they're undereducated. We have to fix the education so that these people get their mind right. The idea that this is uniquely Trumpian and a result of Donald Trump's appearance in the political scene is absolutely ridiculous. Watch a night of MSDNC, which is certainly the House organ of the Democratic Party. Nothing goes on that network that has not been approved by Democratic leadership. What is it? It's an entire night of the racists are under your bed and the sexists are in your closet and the homophobes are your neighbors, and they're all coming for everything that's decent and right.
Please clap.